Ho, ho, ho! Hello, and welcome to another episode of News from the Gelding. Okay, so this is the first of my Christmas episodes. Whoop-de-doo. I don't have much to show what I've been working on recently, so I thought I would do for the very first time some readings from my book, James of Galendar. So, if you fancy listening to a bit of that, join me shortly and we shall begin. Okay, hello and welcome back. Okay, so the first thing I should probably do is pop up a little picture of the book itself, and down below is a link. So if you haven't already read my book, then perhaps give it a try. It's priced quite reasonably, the Kindle format. The paperback is in English money, £8.99 through Amazon. But if you want to buy it directly from me, it'll be the same price, but the postage will be included. And I'll sign it, which will increase its value by perhaps a penny or something like that. So worth the speculation, I'd say. Okay, so there we are. There's the book. It has been selling very well, and that's an understatement. So pop up this little picture, screen grab. This is my dashboard from my account. As you can see, I haven't sold a single copy in over a month. In fact, it's probably closer to 6 weeks. I think I sold one copy towards the beginning of November, perhaps. But otherwise, it's been a barren, remorseless, bleak place. Not remorseless. Anyway, it's slightly disappointing. The other book I published, self-published, about my cycle ride across Japan, it sold almost continuously for around 4 years. So I'd get maybe 4 sales a month or something like that. But this one, I think the other book was more niche. It was a niche. It was specifically about cycling in Japan and sleeping rough. So people were actively looking for that, and they found my book and they bought it. But with my fantasy book, obviously there's a great big, sea of fantasy books, and they're constantly coming out. So it's a lot to expect someone to be browsing all those hundreds of thousands of books and picking mine. But my marketing strategy has obviously failed, and it's failed because I don't have a strategy. I have no interest whatsoever in the marketing side of things, which is the problem. Hopefully, I'll work on that a bit more in the new year. Probably won't, but that's the thing. It makes it slightly harder to be then working on the sequel if no one's really, I know I've had some good feedback from people that have read it, so and I know they're looking forward to the sequel. But spending thousands of hours writing a book that no one really gets to see is a bit of it's a hard thing to motivate yourself. But I still absolutely love doing it, so I'll carry on doing it. But sometimes it's ups and downs. Anyway, let's do a bit of reading. Well, I'll read to you. If you're watching this video, you've probably already read the book, because I don't get many new views as such. So if you have already read the book, don't worry, you don't have to watch any more of this. Well, thank you for reading it in the first place. Anyway, I'm a bit negative, I know, but it's just the way I am, I suppose. Anyway, okay, let's do a bit of reading. So I've picked out 4 different parts of the book, and each one I've chosen for a different reason. So the first one, this is about, so the whole story is about James, really, who has a diagnosis of a brain tumor. And that's the beginning of what happens thereafter, his transportation to another world, which might or might not be due to the psychosis generated by the brain tumor. We don't know. I chose this because I wrote this based on my own experience of going for a diagnosis of that could have been multiple sclerosis. So what I'm going to read you is pretty much what I experienced, other than the fact that I was given the good news and poor James wasn't. But anyway, here we are. I'm not particularly good at reading either. Well, reading in a nice way, I suppose. But you'll get the gist. Okay, here we go. He slumped back against the chair and gazed up at the sign hanging from the ceiling. Neurophysiology. Before today, he hadn't known the word existed, let alone what it meant. But now, that one word hovering above his head meant a great deal. It lay like a leaden weight upon the gnawing pain inside his head, the numbness prickling through the left side of his body, the arm, the leg, the half of his face that no longer felt his own. The impending consultation seemed not only to be unnecessary, but ultimately futile. He didn't need the professional opinion of a doctor to tell him what he already knew. He was dying. A door opened and a tall, thin man in a white coat poked his head out like a shy cuckoo emerging from its clock. "Mr. Gelding," he said, his eyes reluctantly alighting upon the ward's sole occupant. "Would you like to come inside?" Without waiting for a reply, the man's head disappeared back out of sight. "Would I like to come inside?" James mumbled as he got unsteadily to his feet. "No, not especially." Smiling mirthlessly, he made his way towards the pool of sterile light filtering onto the gloomy ward. As usual, the numbness in his left side made him walk strangely, as though unseen hands were trying to pull him off course, and when he reached the door he had to pause to steady himself. Wringing his sweaty hands, he held his numb tongue against the roof of his mouth, and with another deep sigh entered the room. The office was small and sparsely furnished. A row of metal filing cabinets lined one wall, and a huge wooden desk sat in the middle of the room, blocking the way forward like a crude barricade against intruders. A potted plant that had seen better days sat forlornly in one corner, its waxy leaves coated in a thick layer of dust. The doctor had already taken his seat on the other side of the desk and was busily thumbing through a collection of papers when the sound of the closing door made him glance up. "Please, take a seat, Mr. Gelding," the doctor said, gesturing to an empty chair safely separated from him by the wide expanse of mahogany. For a few moments the doctor returned his attention to his papers, his eyes anchored to the pages as though determined not to stray beyond them. "Now," he said, at last bringing his eyes to meet his patient's. "Last week, as you know, a number of scans were performed upon your brain and the cervical portion of your spinal cord." James nodded, suddenly feeling uncomfortable that he had yet to speak a single word to the other man. The doctor stood, and drawing a number of transparent sheets from a brown envelope, walked over to a light box attached to the wall. Flicking a switch, he promptly tucked the sheets inside its top edge, where they hung like a series of macabre prints in a photographer's studio. "As we previously discussed, our concern was that you might be experiencing the early signifiers of multiple sclerosis," the doctor continued, looking hesitantly between the illuminated images of his brain and the head that contained it. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Gelding, but I have some very bad news for you." James had been prepared for these very words ever since the doctor had first suggested the MRI scans 2 weeks before. Hearing them now was like watching a long-awaited train finally pull into its station. The scans would reveal the blight of legions spread across his brain and spinal cord, signifying the indiscriminate death of nerve cells due to the autoimmune disease he had read so much about. He knew the salient points of the diagnosis by heart. He knew that it was a disease for which there was no cure, a death that would be slow and degrading as his nervous system slowly crumbled around him. James took a deep breath and tried to meet the doctor's eyes with what little bravery he could muster. "Mr. Gelding, I'm afraid you have cancer." There we are. So there we are. Poor James has had some bad news. I was lucky. I got a clean bill, more or less. But those all of those things experiencing, the numbness and not walking quite right, that was what I was experiencing at the time. And yeah, there we are. Do. Okay, the second one. This little bit, I'm going to read just a short part describing a creature that James encounters in this other world. One of the early signs that he's somewhere very different. Okay, where shall I begin? Okay. A high, keening chirrup made him reluctantly draw his eyes back down to where a curious bird now perched upon a nearby stone. Its tiny head twitched this way and that, sending its black pip eyes in his direction. There was a blur of wings, and then miraculously the bird was perched upon his knee. Once again James's mind sought to master the growing panic that threatened to overwhelm him, for the bird was unlike any living creature he had ever encountered. Apart from its jet black eyes, the feathers and skin encasing its tiny body were completely transparent, the crimson tangle of its internal viscera filling the bird's outline like a grisly cross-section in a biology textbook. The bird appeared to scrutinize him closely, emitting short, delicate chirrups as though demanding questions of him. Its tiny heart beat like a furious red sun within its chest, its sack-like stomach filled with desiccated berries the colour of ripe lemons. There we are. It's a strange bird, isn't it? See right through it and see into its gutty what's and whatnot. A few episodes, well, I don't know how many episodes ago, I did a little drawing what I imagined that bird might look like. Check it out if you like. Why not? Okay, right, this bit is a brief description of the main evil, bad, whatever it is. This isn't really a spoiler. I mean, it's just a glimpse into what James is facing here. Because there's always a bad guy in these things. This one's bad. Okay. Where shall I begin? Okay. I don't know how much of this I'll read, but let's just see what happens. The dark man stood over him, his billowing gown moving like slow waves on a sunless world. The very light of the sun appeared unwilling to illuminate his features, but what passed for the man's face threatened to tear what little sanity James had retained. For the face that scowled down at him was a blur, a shifting sculpture of grotesquerie that used the human skull as its muse. When at last he spoke, his voice had a timbre as deep and maleficent as the chasm below. Pitiful. A sound like the mockery of laughter seethed from the blurred face, a sound as obscene as the scream of a child falling to its death. Desperate old fool, he cackled. The figure bent closer, his skeletal arm resting nonchalantly upon his bended knee. James, he whispered, I want you to understand something very important. James nodded obediently, as though to display any other reaction to his words would be unforgivable. You will suffer. The man's words were laced with such hate and delivered with such overwhelming certainty that James felt sure he was about to be killed where he lay. But instead, the man turned and walked to the edge of the cliff. I'll read just a little bit more. Raising a skeletal arm high above his head, a lurid green light ignited in the palm of his hand. The light was feeble, like the phosphorescent glow of swamp gas, but steadily it grew brighter, until it blossomed into a blinding orb of light, like a second sun birthed from his hand. Cowering helplessly where he lay, James squinted past the frenzied flickering of light to the shattered hills far below. From out of a gaping hole in the side of the hill, a liquid black poured forth. It looked like smoke from some smouldering ruin beneath the earth, but gradually it began to take shape, forming tendrils and fronds like the poisonous underbelly of a jellyfish. As the entity drew nearer, its shape grew more certain, its vast bulk knitting together as it flew through the air towards them. The thing that eventually came to rest upon the cliff edge was an abomination beyond all description. It was a creature of rippling black muscle and blazing yellow eyes, a cancerous growth that had been ripped from the earth and given the means to spread its rot. Turning the painful blur of his face to the hulking beast at his side, the man's voice once more imprinted its malice upon the air. "Bring him to me alive. Kill the rest." The monster flexed its giant body in reply, bracing its many tentacles upon the ground like coiled springs. A violent shudder passed through its body, and then it leapt into the sky like a bolt of black lightning. For a long time the man stared at the receding shape of the monster he had created, but when at last he turned, the blurred outline of his face was contorted by an obscene smile. The man walked forward as the air shimmered and crackled around him. The bones littering the ground were pressed into dust, the ruined soil smouldering like the bed of a funeral pyre. "You will all suffer," the man said, repeating his earlier words as though confirming a promise already made. Raising a foot as black as pitch, he poised it above James's head and stamped down with all his might. Goodness. He's a bad guy. He's bad. Okay. Last bit. After all that bleakness, let's have a bit of merriment. So, towards the end of the book, spoiler alert, but it doesn't really, I'm not spoiling anything really. There's a dance, there's a festival. The Gelders have a festival every 5 years to celebrate the full moon, a green moon, which they call the forest moon, called the Pentaclave. That's what the festival's called, and part of it is a dance around a tree they call the choosing tree. This is very similar to a pagan maypole dance, but I've just altered it to my own ways. Basically, you do this dance around the tree. You have ribbons tied to you, and you keep dancing, and everyone get the ribbons all get woven together, and eventually everyone gets caught together. And it's supposed to go that whoever you end up next to has been chosen for you as a mate by the tree. It's only a light-hearted thing. They don't really believe it, but it's something they do occasionally. Okay, let's have a look here. Where does it begin? Oh, got the wrong page. Tavin pushed him gently towards the tree as a young woman playfully pulled him into the midst of the dance. "The ladies of Galendar will not see you wrong-footed," Tavin shouted, raising his flask in salute. Before he could protest any further, James was swept into the colourful dance. His movements were hesitant and uncertain as he blundered between the other dancers, but unseen hands guided his passage, pulling his body into swirls and spirals as he swept around the tree. Soon James's grimace had transformed into a shy smile, and then to open laughter as he greeted the smiles of men and women skipping past. The pace of the music increased, and breathlessly he passed around and around the tree, swept upon a tide of shifting colour. The music and laughter seemed to swirl and eddy around him, carrying his clumsy feet as though buoyed upon a fast-flowing river. Glancing above, he noticed the beautiful tapestry being woven above their heads. Amidst the reds, golds, and greens, his ribbon was like a spiral of blue flame. Just as the pace of the dance was becoming too fast to keep up, the tangle of ribbons drew the dancers together, tangling them up like so many flies caught in a multicoloured web. James felt other bodies press against his own and turned to his side, giddy and chuckling. Beside him, a young couple had already embraced, their smiles joined together in a passionate kiss. Blushing, he turned away as another pair of dark eyes settled upon him. but the smile upon the woman's scarred face died as quickly as his own. I'll leave it there, because then I'm giving away things. Okay, there we are. I suppose it gives you an idea of the style in which I write, and some of the content of the book. Yeah, so if you've watched this far and you fancy reading it, give it a go. I'm working on the sequel, and for the last 3 weeks, that's all I've been doing. I've just been writing recently. That's why I've got no drawings or paintings to show. So yeah, it's coming on well. I'm up to, in terms of word count, approaching 70,000 words, so perhaps 20,000 more. I'm hoping to have it released in the spring. I've already edited it heavily, so it's in fairly good shape, I think. So hopefully I'll keep to that schedule, and then the plan is to release the final part of this trilogy in the same year. So anyway, oh, and also if you haven't already written a review of the book, it'd be nice to see a review if you like. But I've already had 7, and thanks very much for everyone that's done that. That's really kind of you all. Yeah, so anyway, I'll leave it there. Next week I'm going to be doing a video on my favorite fantasy films, special Christmas episode. Okay, so if you fancy joining me then, I'll see you then. Have a lovely week, and cheerio.